Scott Diaz, we are live.
We are.
You're fresh off the plane. How's it going?
Yeah, it's good. Got in yesterday about 10:30.
Yeah.
Feeling it a bit yesterday, but
Good.
straight through crew.
So for anyone that might be wondering why we've suddenly popped up as a live stream on your Facebook feed, I'm Will, High Rankin, and I'm going to be doing a series of sort of nice conversations and chats with interesting and wonderful people in the scene. So DJs, producers, engineers, label bosses, sample pack makers, generally people that I find interesting and hope that you will too. And so today I'm joined for my first one. Scott, you're my first.
Inaugural.
Yeah. Scott Diaz, you wonderful man. Thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure.
Good. So for anyone that is unfamiliar with your work, tell us who you are.
Well, I'm Scott Diaz, a DJ and producer, sound designer, remixer. I run a label. I'm from Brighton, same as you.
Mm-hmm.
The best little city in the world.
Yeah, certainly the best little city in England.
And I've been living in the US on and off for the last 4 years with my fiancée.
Very nice.
And back now here for 6 months for a summer of gigs and stuff. But yeah, I've been involved in kind of making music and playing music probably for 20 years, probably making a good living at it for maybe like the last 10. Started off playing kind of garage. And then got into house. I was kind of into house at the same time, but they were kind of running parallel, but I was kind of more into garage and I was playing garage more at the time.
What year did you first discover garage?
Well, I was actually into sort of hardcore and jungle from about 94.
Good.
At school.
Glad you've said that.
That was kind of my gateway into sort of dance culture. Borrowed a mixtape borrowed a Dreamscape 11 tape from a friend, you know, from the tape packs that used to come out. And kind of got into that, and then I met a few friends, local Brighton people who were into the same music, jungle and drum and bass and stuff. And then around about 98, started going in Urban Records, which was run by Mick Fuller in Brighton, and was buying kind of sort of few house and garage bits, really. It was like early kind of like Dem 2, Destiny, and kind of early sort of Grant Nelson, sort of bump and flex remixes. I think they were like 99 they started coming out. So there's a few kind of bits of like what you consider to be sort of like London UK garage, you know.
Right.
And it was obviously quite a new sound at that point, the kind of, especially the two-step stuff, as it was sort of like, you know, changing from kind of, you know, been speed garage. And so I picked up a few of those things as well, like speed garage, you know, white labels and all that kind of stuff. They were just like doing bootlegs of like Nina Simone and putting it on a, you know.
That's how everyone gets into music production, doing bootlegs of like classic old tunes.
And then it just went from there. And then, you know, when I was in the shop, Mick would kind of play, you know, there'd always be, I mean, it was a house shop really as much as it was a garage shop.
He was one half of Fats and Smalls, am I right? No.
But they filmed the video for Turn Around in there.
Yeah,
and that's why you know it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so there'd always be stuff playing. There'd always be like, you know, Musts at Work or Strictly Rhythm Records or Defected stuff or whatever it was.
Yeah.
And so I'd end up just kind of being like, oh, I like that. And so I'd buy a few bits of, you know, house bits here and there. And then as it kind of went on, I mean, I was into garage heavily till probably like 2002, 2003. And I was still making stuff. But the house thing was kind of becoming more and more interesting as the garage thing kind of faded away and got kind of darker and grimier. And then obviously it became kind of dubstep and grime and UK funky and all those kind of permutations afterwards. And, you know, I was still kind of more into the musical and like soulful stuff. So that kind of led me down the house road. So
why do you think that garage, I don't know, it had this sort of incredible peak commercially in very early noughties, so 2000, 2001-ish, and then it just suddenly overnight it almost seemed to, I don't know, in my eyes anyway, I wasn't I have to be honest, I didn't like garage at the time. However, now I love it.
I mean, at one point
I just had to mature.
MJ Cole didn't like garage either.
Oh my god!
Can you believe that? I mean, he was into hardcore and jungle, drum and bass, going to raves like all night, you know, raves.
Yeah.
And he was basically into that, and he didn't like garage at all.
I was a drum and bass absolutist at the time, and to like drum and bass and garage at the same time was...
Well, they were polar opposites, weren't they? One was about kind of, you know, spending loads of money, dressing up, and like kind of being really concerned about like your image and what you look like, and having this kind of like stilo, this like steez, you know, and kind of being cool and everything. And drum and bass was like the total opposite. It was like, go to the rave in your sweatpants. Like,
yeah, if you were concerned about your appearance at a drum and bass rave, you were doing it wrong.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, to answer your question, I think there was kind of like a sort of perfect storm of problems. I think it got, you know, too big too quickly and was kind of a victim of its own success.
Yeah.
And there was way too much money around at that point in the music business, and people were getting like crazy money to sign singles. Like, you know, Daniel Bedingfield, Gotta Get Through This, which was on Relentless originally, which is an independent, which was, you know, it's kind of like it was an underground label. It was like a big underground label, but it was an independent. I mean, that got signed for like £250,000 by all accounts, and it just went nuts. And then obviously there was that was the start of like MC culture as well.
Yes.
And in terms of them being kind of more, well, obviously MC culture is always around in drum and bass, and it obviously comes from the Caribbean, you know, influence music and the Jamaican toasting and stuff like that over music, which is where it comes from. But that was kind of the start of them becoming the focus rather than the music. So then you started to have the crews like So Solid Crew, Pay As You Go, all of that. And that they basically were like, well, we have something we want to say, and we're going to make this about. It's kind of like the sort of the music is almost ancillary to like what's going on. It's just a beat for them to rap over, essentially.
Yeah.
But it was like, it was authentic to people making, to kind of people doing UK garage. It was authentic because we struggled to have like any credible kind of hip hop and R&B artists because it wasn't really our sound.
Yeah.
But with garage and grime and stuff, we found kind of they found their place basically to fit in. This is our way of kind of expressing ourselves. But obviously with that, they're telling different types of stories. Garage was about kind of keeping it like light and bubbly, and you know, they were coming in there talking about like all this darkness that's happening on the streets and the stuff they're getting into, and there's kind of drugs and all this stuff involved. And so I think that kind of ended up splitting things, you know. And then there ended up being lots of trouble and people getting stabbed and people going out like with, you know, going out like armed up basically to go to a party, which seems insane, but that's what people were doing. It's like this, you know, that's the problem with music and street culture and all these things, they intertwine. And it's like, so I think that happened, and then there was, you know, kind of a disappearance of like girls from the scene, and they found it a bit too aggressive. And
once the girls start disappearing out of a scene,
once the ladies leave, you struggle. Yeah,
I mean, unless the ladies were never there in the first place, like with dubstep.
Right.
Had to desperately try and encourage them in. Girls, come on. It's like, no, we're all right with drum and bass for the minute. Like it's we can kind of, you know, we can actually dance to it rather than just a load of geezers stood around like smelling bad and just sort of.
I think that I think that was the problem with garage. And I think it's about cycles as well. Everything has cycles, you know.
Yeah.
Certain types of music are popular at certain times for certain reasons, and you know, there tends to be like a trend towards that. And it's, you know, it's the same with fashion and lots of other things in life. But it's good in a way, because I think now the kind of garage thing is back, you know, and it's been back for a little while, but it's the influences have always been there, kind of peppered in people's music. And if you listen to, like, if you actually look at a lot of the DJs that are doing really well now, so many of them reference garage. I mean, it's crazy the amount of them that are like, you know, and they're still, you know, they'll drop like It's a London Thing in their set still, and you know, people like, you know, Ben UFO and all these people that are kind of like really well respected as DJs in their own right. They're all kind of, you know, so many. I mean, even you look at people like Disclosure, who have done so well now. They're taking it to like a massive level, like stadium level. But essentially, their sound is rooted in garage, you know, with obviously R&B tendencies and, you know, some pop and stuff like that. But so it's great because now you've got kind of, you don't necessarily have the boom and bust approach, but you've got loads of people just kind of doing these like garage tinged kind of productions and people sort of weaving it in, and that's great because it allows loads of room for like musical sort of, you know, expression in that sense, but it also means there's kind of scope for playing that stuff still, and you're not necessarily going to have all the problems that you had before. And maybe and dubstep potentially is going to have the same kind of resurgence, I think. Yeah,
and I think it will, in the same way that garage is now, it may end up being a little bit more of a sort of sustainable thing. Like drum and bass has sort of weathered the storm over the years.
Right. I mean, drum and bass now is basically like isn't like it's essentially woven completely into the culture of like British dance music. It's not going anywhere.
Exactly. Like in the same way that house isn't going anywhere. Obviously, house is it's a bigger scene. It's I mean, I wouldn't know how many multiples of the drum and bass scene house is, like particularly across Europe, but the house scene is always going to be there. But there's so many different, subgenres and splinter genres of it that, they will weave around in their sort of intricate way, but as an entity, it's not going anywhere. And garage seems now that it's just a much more sort of sustainable level. It's not the Bitcoin equivalent of a genre as that it once was. It's like, no, garage is now fiat currency. It's okay. You can trust in it. Like if people are wanting to, I even think like 3 or 4 years ago when it sort of suddenly made a resurgence, like, myself included, loads of people just like, oh, wow, we can do garage now. This would be loads of fun. And there's a bit of a spike, but it's settled and leveled off now. And it's like, oh, okay, well, that actually you could think seriously about pursuing a more meaningful career out of that genre.
I think for a while, for me, for a while, I kind of was like, I still work on garage like projects, I've got another name that I use, Echelon, and I've done like a couple of things under that name, and they're kind of this sort of, weird sort of, it's like a mix of kind of like garage influences, but it's kind of quite bashy and bassy, and but there's kind of like sort of techie sort of influences in there as well, and I'm still doing kind of more like traditional kind of two-step sounding stuff, but I just don't really have an outlet for it.
Right.
In terms of like, it doesn't really fit with the house stuff, so it has to go under another name, and you have to find a label. And it's hard enough kind of making a career as one name as an artist, or let alone trying to do it on 3 or 4 fronts. It's really difficult to do. So
how many aliases have you got now? You've definitely had a few over the years.
Lots, yeah. I've got tons, yeah. I've got like Scott Tonic was the original name.
Yeah, of course.
And then I've got Echelon, me and Matt Jam are Kings of Swing.
Yeah.
We've been Movie Star, Black House Project.
Yeah, Evolve or Die.
Evolve or Die. Yeah. And I'm sure there's a few
DJ
others
Scotty
as well.
Big Boy and the Bacon Bunch. That's my favourite one.
Yeah. So yeah.
So when did you hook up with Matt Jam? That was
personal.
Hey,
keep that one, Matt.
We'll keep it a laugh a minute at Loopmasters Live. Were you making stuff on your own first?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So we had a mutual friend called Bacon,
right.
Who that was his DJ name anyway, and he was kind of a DJ in London, and he was doing loads of promotion and stuff, and he was kind of just a man about town, like the one guy in the scene that like everybody knows, and he can introduce you to everyone and all that. So I became good friends with him because he lived kind of local to where I was living at the time, and I gave him a CD of like a bunch of stuff I was working on. This is like 2005, 2006, and it was garage, but it was kind of like, sort of. This was what they were terming at the time new school garage, because it was kind of like this sort of small rebirth.
Yeah.
And there was like actually a bunch of producers doing stuff, like the producer Tourist, who his real name's Will Phillips. He was making garage at the time, and he was doing stuff for MJ Cole's label, and he was kind of seen as like the next MJ Cole, if you want to kind of tout at that, which he hated. But him and he had the same.
That surely is a nice as a compliment.
It is, and he was good friends with Matt MJ Cole, but also like. They had a lot of the same story, they both sort of started playing piano at 4 or 5, and they had the same kind of history. So that's why the comparisons were made. And he's gone on. I mean, he's been, he's won a Grammy now and everything for co-writing with Sam Smith, and so he's supremely talented. But he was kind of in that scene. Huxley was also in that scene, using another name to make kind of two-step stuff. So there was a few people there that were kind of like, maybe we could go on and do something if we keep at it. And so there was this small kind of, but it never really went anywhere major. But at that time, I had a CD of stuff, and I gave it to my friend Bacon, and he passed it on to Matt Jam without me knowing. And Matt played he had a show on Kiss at the time, long-running show, and he used to do some night on Wednesday or Thursday mornings, sometimes here on Wednesday or Thursday mornings. And he played like 7 or 8 of my tracks in one show.
Wow.
Yeah,
okay.
which was kind of a big deal. And then he reached out to me and said, you and a couple of like Mike Delinquent and someone else at the time was like, you guys are like my tips for this year,
Yeah.
So keep going. And so then we just kind of stayed in touch. And then he started saying, look, I've got a studio and stuff over here. What are you doing? Why don't we come over and work on some stuff? So I started going over, and we started working on a few things, and we were kind of like doing house basically at the time. And we ended up doing a few remixes for like Alicia Dixon, and this is sort of back in like 2008. The White Boys, we remixed Sambuca. So it's kind of interesting because obviously you have that foot in the garage world and foot in the house world. And, Matt, obviously having the name that he's got, on the reputation that he's got, on the history that he's got, was able to, you know, somebody like the Y Boys would come and say, hey, do you want to remix Sambuca? Yeah, okay, me and Scott will do that. You know, so you kind of ended up getting access to these tracks, all these tracks that I'd grown up with, basically, and that I've been playing. You know, I was playing Sambuca when I DJ'd in like Corfu when I was 18, and Ibiza when I was 18, and then all these, you know, a few years later, I'm getting to remix these tracks. So it's kind of a pretty cool. It's pretty cool the way it all comes full circle.
Yeah, it gets pretty strange when things like that start happening.
Especially when you get really deeply like embedded into a scene. It's just because then you become kind of part of it so much that you're not even stopping to think that like, oh, we're remixing. You know, I'm remixing like Craig David today. You know, we did Blonde and Craig David's single a couple of years ago, and there was some issues. It never came out, but then it ended up coming out on a compilation, a Pure Garage compilation, that like got in the top 5 or, you know, top 10 on iTunes and stuff. So that did really well. But, you know, years ago, I mean, if you'd said to me when I was 18 and buying all the Sunchip mixes of Craig David and stuff, that was my dream. You know, to be like, God, I'd love to get hold of a Craig David vocal one day. And,
yeah, can you imagine?
You know,
like, or even like finding actual acapellas and stuff that weren't officially released of things like that, and just sort of listening to it. Oh wow, yeah, imagine this. And then you get to the point where like, oh yeah, do you want to just do you want to do this remix for us? What?
Yeah, and it just
oh yeah, sure. Yeah, obviously I'll just have to check my times, and you know, just to make sure. Like, we're gonna be a remix, Craig David.
Yeah, I mean, I talked to Matt about it a lot because he, I mean, obviously he's given me a lot of good advice over the years, but they remixed everybody from like, you know, Coolio, En Vogue, Boyz II Men, Usher, all the huge American artists at a time when they were the biggest in the world. And he said that, you know, it's not until you look back on things a few years later that you think, wow, we really did do a lot of stuff. And, you know, he was like, the Usher remix comes in, but it's just another remix at the time. You're doing remixes, you're doing a mix a week, you know, 2 mixes a week.
Yeah.
And the studio time's so tightly scheduled, you know, you get like 3 days to do like a dub and a vocal, and of like, let's say of Coolio, and then you just do it, and then the next one that comes in is like the Jamaican, you know, national football team want their like their anthem for the '94 World Cup remix, so you do that, and then the next week it's like En Vogue, and you just don't think that, oh, it's En Vogue, it's Usher, you just do it, and then it's not until all these years later that you're like, crap, we really did like Usher, you know, and it's all went all around the world, and you know, was on the CDs with, you know, the main mixes and everything. So it's hard to appreciate sometimes what you're doing.
Yeah,
until you can kind of look back on it. But
it's also weird, like what releases you end up on, and like who are the other remixes on when you look back at stuff. Like I was going back over a load of stuff the other day, and was listening to my remix I did for Phone Out years and years ago. Looked at the release, and like my mix is above an Avicii mix of him, like way before he was, you know, way before he made Levels and sort of, you know, skyrocketed.
Went up some levels.
Yeah, went up some too many levels into the ridiculous EDM stratosphere. He at Miami Music Conference, he had his own hotel or something, and then there was like an ice cream van selling at Avicii ice cream, and they only sold one flavour, Avicii flavour. Just like, okay, wonder what that tastes of.
Was it packaged well, but ultimately unsatisfying?
I think so, yeah. It was just all sort of air in here. I kind of like, it's very light. There's no sort of actual substance to it. Outrageous. So then we met in, now, what do you think, 2009?
Yeah, 2009. Yes, that's right. Yeah, because I moved into a flat in 2010, and that time I was already in the studio.
Yeah,
and you were there as well. Yeah.
So I was working at Don't Panic, the flyer distribution company in Brighton. I then stopped working for them, but started renting a very small studio, a sort of broom cupboard sized studio in their office space that was previously. It was previously Ed Solo and Brocky's, and then after that it was Frictions.
I remember this, yeah.
And then it was mine for a bit. And then when Don't Panic moved downstairs, I moved into their old office, and you moved into the little studio.
That's it, yeah.
Yeah. And you were in there making tunes with Matt Jam.
Yep.
And also Tech House with
Charles Green.
The world famous Charles Green. He made me delete that video yesterday.
Did he?
Yeah.
Just yesterday?
Yeah, only yesterday, yeah. Oh. He obviously got reminded about it.
Classic. I'm going to see him next week. But yeah, he's doing amazingly well now.
Really?
Yeah, he's just
Good.
had a release on a label called Four Triangles, which is like a really not good techno label.
Okay.
And he's working for Elite Music Management as a booker.
Yeah.
So he's kind of really deep in the sort of like, and he was working at Guitar and Amp for a couple of years before that.
He'll be at Bergheim.
I said to him, actually, this is like the perfect path for you because, you know, you've spent 2 years essentially getting like real like innate knowledge of all kinds of synths, and you know, now he understands completely that side of the business. And also you meet so many people in a job like that, because everybody that comes in, a lot of people that come in and, you know, they're like serious producers and artists, especially in Brighton. We've got so many people here, so you end up meeting all these people, and you know, this is a relationships business at the end of the day. It's like, give
them a little discount here or there,
and you know, get a bit of
tickle them under the chin,
and learn a few tips and tricks from them. You know, James from the Freemasons goes in there, or you know, Paul from Orbital, you know, and all that stuff. So it's great.
Yeah, no, you meet some interesting characters in places like that. It's or in record shops. I mean, God, if you were working in a record shop,
rest in peace, record shops.
Man, I walked past Rounder Records a couple of days ago. It's now a vape shop. Great. Brilliant.
I mean,
that's what we need, more vape shops.
If anything is a kind of, you know,
that is a sad sign of the times, really.
If anything is the ultimate distillation of the times we're living in, it's that one of Brighton's most cherished record shops is now a vape shop.
Yeah, don't get me started. So you also, around that time, or maybe you've been making them for a little while, you started making sample packs?
Yeah, I started doing them about 2000 and maybe 2000, late 2008, 2009, something like that. But definitely by 2009, I'd done a couple, and it was kind of few and far between at that time. But
almost your 10-year anniversary of
almost
sample
10
packs,
year,
mate.
yeah.
What are you going to do? Anything special?
Probably a tour.
Yeah.
Probably a tour where I just play one sample after another.
Yeah, just like, oh yeah, no, I made this one in like 2010.
The most fun will just be running through the drum hits. It'll just be like 50 kicks in a row.
That would be strangely wonderful in a way, and everyone would be like, can I have that? You could auction them off.
It would be it would be sort of a weird sort of concept performance art piece, wouldn't it? I could maybe have someone like pretending to braid my hair like Moody Man.
What? Someone braids his hair while he DJs?
Have you not seen the video, the Moody Man? I mean, it's absolutely legendary, this thing. You know, like he's a sort of Detroit enigma. Right?
Yeah.
And obviously he's totally like legendary, and you know, and you know all the tracks that have been sampled about, you know, these are my, you know, these MPCs and my hoes and my right. Well, that's been sampled obviously by a bunch of people, and that comes from a Red Bull Music lecture that he did, where he kind of obviously was invited by them to talk about, you know, his background, his workflow,
this is
whatever.
Where he insinuates he makes love to his MPC.
Yeah, and so basically he turns up with two women, and one of them's like braiding his hair while he's talking, and he has the mic, you know, really close to his mouth, and he kind of gets up and starts walking around, and then he's like talking something, he wants to make a point, so he says to the woman, like, hold up a minute, and she stops doing it, and he kind of makes a point, and you know, but it's like kind of, he's like channeling Prince or something. It's like a performance, you know. And so anyway, that's kind of what I was referencing. It'd be like a weird performance art piece, you know, just me like just praying, because you know, like how monotonous it sounds when you're just flicking through kick drums trying to find the perfect one. Imagine that in a club with loads of people watching. It'd be kind of weird.
Yeah, yes, it definitely would be weird. I wonder whether or not it would. I think it could be considered high art. It's a weird thing, like cycling through loads and loads and loads and loads and loads of kick drums, because you would, like, if you had someone that wasn't into music production sat next to you and they were like, what are you doing? It's like, I'm trying to find the right kick drum for this track. They go, they all sound like the same. No, they don't.
The amount of times I've made a track and then at the end I've been like, I have to change the kick.
Just like the last 5 minutes of the production. Oh yeah, just changed it. But like, how do you know which one's going to be right? I'll know it when I hear it.
It is interesting how far down that road we've gone, because obviously there's so many sounds available and they've all been kind of processed and reprocessed and layered and all that kind of stuff. And there's obviously, you know, synthesizers that create kicks and, you know, and kick synths and all that. But, you know, effectively when you had like a drum kit, you had one kick.
Yeah. We could slightly tune it.
You would tune, you can tune them, and you know, you might, you know, have certain things. People used to put certain things in there to like damp them or make them sound a certain way, or you know. But essentially, you'd have one kick. So it's interesting how we feel we've got this sort of never-ending palette, but we still can't find. Remember when we had this discussion before, and we were like, we've searched high and low in the Amazon. You went to Amazon in search of the perfect snare.
I know, just like looking down wells and stuff.
There are only 3 snares in existence.
Well, this was sort of the insinuation that there were only actually 3 or 4 snares that had just all been layered slightly differently to create every other snare
and then
drum
one's
in
had
existence.
the sound of a doorbell put over, and then
Yeah.
one's had a sound of a a table being hit, and that's been layered, and that creates another thing, and then that probably gets resampled later on, and so on and so forth. So you're right, there is actually only 3 snares.
Yeah, it's like the sort of origins of language when it all eventually goes back to hieroglyphics and stuff,
right?
And or people communicating in clicks and grunts. Those clicks and grunts have just been sort of layered and layered and layered and processed over the years into the 909 snare drum we love today. Right, okay. So sample packs back in 2009 were a bit of a different kettle of fish than they are now. You certainly
it was like definitely an emerging business at that point. It wasn't really well established.
Yeah, the rules were sort of still being kind of worked out, and the standards. Well, rather than the rules, the standards were kind of
and also a lot of stuff was still sold on CDs even.
Yeah.
At that point, up until that point, I mean, even some stuff back in 2006, 2007. If you wanted to get a Loopmasters released, you had to they actually sent it to you.
Yeah, or I bought some. I couldn't tell you who released these, but some sample CDs from Guitar and Amp Center. They were really expensive.
Yeah, they were like 60 quid a pop.
Yeah, of choirs.
There was a listening booth in there.
Yeah.
Do you remember that? It was like a time and space listening booth.
Yeah.
And you used to go in, listen through kind of, on this booth, and then you'd leave your £10 deposit, and then they'd order it for you.
Oh, really?
Yeah. You leave a £10 deposit, they'd order it for you, and then you'd go in a few days later. I mean, I'm talking back in like 98, 99 now.
Right.
For this was kind of, so what we think of as like sample packs were obviously sample CDs then, and a lot of stuff was audio. It wasn't even data, so it was just recorded as audio, and then you had to kind of chop it in the sampler and stuff.
Yeah, you just record it into your EMU or your Akai or whatever, and deal with it from there.
Yeah.
Well, I think the ones that I got had about 6 or 7 CDs, but it was just all the various different formats spread across all these CDs.
Yeah.
And you just, right, well, I don't need 6 of these CDs, so I'll just take the one with the WAV files on and bung them onto my mum's PC.
Yeah.
Try and hash some sort of music out of it.
At the time in 2009, when I was doing them, there wasn't that many people doing it.
Yeah.
And you're right, there was kind of some... Yeah, there was definitely some sort of a lot still being worked out in terms of standards and stuff. And obviously now they're a lot more flexible, with like MIDI included and Apple loops and things like that, But back then it was kind of just you did WAV and you maybe got Rex and that was it.
Yeah, I feel like you got some strange stuff back in those days as well. Like I remember buying a drum and bass CD that I don't think I was actually able to listen to before I bought it, and it was a big decision to buy this thing.
Yeah.
Taking it back and like, that is drum and bass if you were to if someone described drum and bass to someone who'd never heard it before, and then they made a sample pack, having never actually listened to any drum and bass, but someone was like, well, it's around about 174 BPM, and it kind of goes... and then it's got some sort of quite aggressive synth noises in, and then some more melodic-y bits and some quite fast hats, and someone had sort of had a go at knocking that up, and it's like, I feel like this has been made by someone that maybe does sound design for TV or Foley or something rather, and they've just sort of had a crack at it. Whereas nowadays you've got people who are like, genre leaders, like making packs, and no one's 10 years ago you could never get anything that sort of... Well, actually, no, I guess 10 years ago you could, but in sort of your early noughties, stuff made by, huge name producers would be like, oh, wow, this is, I don't know, this is Richie Hawtin's kick drum, or this is...
Yeah, I think there's a couple of exceptions to that, because Moose T did one.
Yeah.
Back in 97 or 98.
Oh, really?
It was called Houseworks with an X.
Right,
at the end.
yeah.
Yeah, it was called Houseworks. Also, Cold Cut did one.
Oh, that's true.
And that was kind of famous.
Yeah.
And Fatboy Slim did one called Skip to My Breaks or something like that.
He actually had released a bit of music software.
Did he?
Yeah, that you could put it all together in.
Okay.
I think it was free. It might have come on the like the front cover of a magazine or
Future
something.
Music or something. Yeah, so there was 2 or 3 or 4 maybe, you know, people. But and Oliver Lieb was kind of quite a big sound designer at that time, and he did like I bought one of his, and it was like loads of weird effects and soundscapes and stuff like that. It was completely unsuitable for what I needed it for, because I was like into making kind of like you know, kind of like either sort of like drum and bass with, you know, the guys, the kind of crew that I was hanging with at the time, who we'd kind of like started getting a small like studio set up together, and you know, and sort of towards like 98, 99 I was kind of making a bit of garage, because funny enough I actually had a record deal with Honeybeat Records when I was 18,
right?
And Honeybeat were like a pretty big label at that time. They'd had stuff they were managed by Eric Pooley, who was like a well-known sort of artist DJ in the garage scene, and he was a resident at Garage City, which was run by Bobby and Steve. And they'd had loads of people, I forget now, but they had like Zed Bias, Ray Hurley. And again, that was through Urban Records, through the record shop. Mick, the guy that worked with Mick Fuller and owned the shop, gave my CD to Eric Pooley. There's about 5 tracks on there.
Yeah, that's kind of how it used to work for a little while.
Yeah, and so he's without me even knowing, he gave the tracks. And then Eric Pooley just phoned me up and said, "Oh yeah, Eric Pooley here. I want to offer you a deal on the label." And the money was crazy. It was like, thinking about, well, in relative to now, I'm talking about. But I was 18 and I hadn't even made a proper track yet. I didn't even own a studio at this point, or own a setup. I kind of had some stuff with other people that we kind of pulled in to get. But it was basically a 5-track deal, and it lasted a year or 5 tracks, whichever came first. And the first single advance, I would get £1,000. The second, I'd get 1,000. The third, I'd get 1,500. The fourth, I'd get $2,000, and the fifth, I would have gotten $2,500. Which, as an 18-year-old, being told that, you know, and because there was people I liked on this label.
That's worth about $200,000 back in those days as well.
Exactly, in old money, yeah. But needless to say, you know, and it all kind of like, Honeybeat kind of just, they disappeared, and it all went a bit weird with them, and they kind of, and then they resurfaced a few years later, a run by somebody else, who then also said, "Yeah, I want to sign some stuff," and then that never happened. But that's another story. Right. But you know, but it just goes back to my point about like how much money there was, even for like even me, who hadn't even made. You know, he obviously saw some potential, but I didn't. It wasn't like I had, you know, 10 tracks that were finished and ready to release. He was kind of, obviously he was hedging his bets, but you know, it was kind of done on the basis of like, well, look, I can offer you this advance, but obviously you're not going to get it unless you deliver something that's of good quality. So there's no risk in there in that sense. But the fact that they were prepared to do that kind of, you know, is it speaks volumes about kind of what was going on then. But that's when I had my very first deal when I was 18. Technically.
Wow. Well, you could shift units on vinyl back then, and if you were doing upwards of 500 copies of anything, which was kind of the minimum really you were ever likely to press, and you sold them, there was money to be made. Like I remember doing a bootleg of the Nancy Sinatra Bang Bang track that was in Kill Bill, and the Audio Bullies sampled it. Did a drum and bass bootleg of that, which is like 3,500 copies of it on vinyl. It's just ridiculous. Like if you think about that now, what you would have to do to sell 3,500 copies of a drum and bass release on vinyl.
Yeah. I think there was some some prominent bootlegs around, garage bootlegs around at that time, like The Boy Is Mine, the Architects version. Yeah. That apparently sold something like 70,000 units on vinyl.
Bootleg.
But if anyone from Brandy and Monica's labels listening, it probably sold 20 copies.
Yeah, probably about. There's loads of them sitting around now.
You can't believe what you hear on the internet.
For God's sake. Don't take anything we say as gospel. Record shops were like a real hub of actually being able to get your music to the right people. Like I used to go into Electrodisc, which was run by a guy called Mickey Freeze.
Mickey Freeze, yeah.
And when it's slightly painful memories, I must be honest, of taking in tracks that I'd made on my mum's computer.
I used to play him stuff too.
Recorded onto mini disc.
Yeah, I had mini disc as well.
And then we'd take that in there with some enormous cable and say, "Can I play you this on the shop speakers?"
Yeah.
And
which were never like high-end reference monitors.
No, they certainly weren't. While there were other people in the shop and like trying to pick my moment of like when to, do it. And these tracks that I was making were, I mean, I'd only been making stuff for 6 months or something off some software that a friend of mine bought off someone in a park. Like, it's ridiculous. And
I used to take cassette tapes into to Ed Solo and he'd sit in his studio with me and listen to them, and give me feedback. Yeah,
that's a little bit less intimidating.
Yeah, of course. And but I also used to do the same thing with Mickey, because I know Mickey from the Electricist days. My friend Mark Wall, like youngster, used to shop in there all the time.
Yeah.
So I'd go in there with him, and yeah, you're right. You're always like waiting for your moment. When there's like, is there anyone in here that looks like they're going to judge me?
Yeah, oh God. And then like Mickey and another guy called Vinny in there would just tear my tunes to pieces, like absolutely mercilessly. Like Vinny be like, "What is this? Oh, this is awful. This is doing my head in." Like, oh God. Like, it was just the most brutal feedback. And then I would go away and come back with about like another 17 tracks. I was making about 3 tunes a day or something. Ridiculous with like Fruity Loops 2. And would make loops in Fruity Loops 2 and then put them into Acid and arrange it in Acid and then bring it in on recorded badly onto mini disc. And then eventually they were sort of, suddenly one day, like Mickey was like, "This is all right, actually." I was like, da, da, da. And and then somehow I managed to eventually make something that was sort of good enough to release. I think I feel like Electros might have closed down by that point, though. And so I don't think I ever actually
they probably weren't able to sell any records because they were just listening to your demos all the time.
I'm just in there hogging the speakers with people with their hands over their
all
ears.
The customers are saying, "Can I listen to this?" And you're like, "Your stuff's playing." So yeah,
it's that meme with the kid with the trumpet and the girl with her hands over her ears. And it's like, that's me with my latest demo, and the girl's like everyone else in the record shop. Oh God, my life's just been one never-ending meme. But they would also, I would give CDs, but then I upgraded to actually just giving people CDs, and then suddenly, you would give a DJ a CD at a gig.
Yeah.
I gave one, and Friction was the first person who ever rang me up. Like, you just put your number on it, and so here you are. And I must have given out hundreds. But like Ed Friction rang me up and was like, "Oh, all right, yeah, I listened to your thing. It's all right. Like, there's promise in it. Like, it's, you're not there yet, but I can see what you're going for and keep going," I guess, which was really nice and obviously meant a lot to me when I was 17 or something. Of course, now you just fire off a million SoundCloud links.
Right.
Demanding that people check out your SoundCloud.
Well, yeah, I mean, I had a discussion with Spoonie when I went on his show from the Dream Team, and he was saying, we were sort of talking about how I don't know if it's a good or a bad thing that like the hierarchy in a lot of ways seems to have kind of disappeared, like now people don't really kind of, I mean, some of the stuff I get messaged on email or Facebook is just like crazy. Like, I'll have people just messaging me about stuff that isn't even to do with me. Like, it isn't like a mix that I made and I played a track and they want to know what it is. They're just like, "Tell me what this tune is," and it's just, they'll record it, and it's an audio clip in Facebook of a mix they're listening to that they recorded on their phone that they want to know what the track is.
Tune ID.
So they're listening to a streamed version. They've recorded that streamed version on their phone, and now I'm expected to listen to that clip,
probably on your phone,
on my phone, and tell them what the track is. And then, if I know what the track is, which most of the time I will, they then say, "Where can I buy it?" And this
are you running a record shop on your Facebook
These
page
are the kind of discussions that I have, and it's like, it's great that you can interact with people and they can reach out. It's awesome and stuff. I've had lots of like success because of that. But there's no like hierarchy anymore. Like, and it plays into your point perfectly about record shops. Like, when you went in a record shop, there was a hierarchy.
Yeah.
Right. You kind of knew or had to sort of quickly understand where you fitted in that hierarchy.
Yeah.
You didn't get to like going behind the counter was a privilege.
That was a big deal.
That was rarefied air. Once you got to that point, you could start picking out records for people, whatever. And it was like, it went up from there. But at first, you would go in there, you wouldn't know anyone. You'd be looking for, waiting your turn.
Intimidating shops.
You'd never get to listen to your stuff on the speakers. No. It was always like, other stuff was getting played. And you slowly just, as you went in there and spent more money and kind of became more ingrained in the sort of, in the culture and in the community, and started, I'm going to come to that gig, and you pick up the flyers and see what was going on. And that became your world. It literally was a community. And so, but now there's none of that. That filter's completely gone. So now you just have people that say, tell me what this track is, or send me that track that you just put. It's not it's not even finished yet. It's not even mastered, or well, actually, I just told you it's out today. So why would you message me to ask for it for free when you could easily just stream it or buy it? So that's an interesting thing that's happened over recent years. The hierarchy has kind of disappeared, and the record shop was a big part of that building that hierarchy and that.
Yeah,
and it's kind of like paying your dues to me.
I think
that's
is.
how people can sit here and say, oh well, you shouldn't be like you shouldn't be like that towards people reaching out and asking you for help or asking you questions or whatever. And it's not really about the asking for help part, because I'm happy to help everybody, but it's more just about like we all of us pretty much up to a certain point had to pay our dues. We had to graft. We had to actually spend money on records and equipment, and and that was kind of your gateway into being like, I'm serious about this, and this is something that's important to me, and I'm going to spend time and invest in it and invest in myself, because it's give and take. It is a culture and it's a community, and you can't just take from a culture. You have to give to it as well, and give all, like, whether that's buying music, supporting the artists, supporting the gigs, buying samples and sounds, paying for the software that you use. It's all part of that process to me.
Yeah.
And so the hierarchy and music shops and record shops and all that are kind of like part of that full circle, and it's a shame that bit at least is gone or almost gone.
Okay, let's take a hypothetical situation. Well, let's say you have a challenge, and that challenge is to start a new alias. You're not allowed to tell anyone it's you. And you have your production level now. You're obviously a very skilled producer. You can make stuff to the same standard as yours. You've got over the first hurdle of being able to make good records, which obviously is the first thing to, basically you've got to learn your software. You've got, build your sound, that thing that makes you different from anybody else. Like, because if you go out to a club, you're going to hear, depending on what genre of music you're going out to, you're going to hear between 100 and 300 records in a night. Yeah. What is it going to be about your record that people who are drunk will remember when they go home and remember the next day? This is like, your record has to have an element of character and personality into it that is going to resonate with people. So there's your first hurdle to get over. But your next hurdle is you have to try and get that music out there. So being we're not giving CDs to DJs in clubs, you're not going into record shops anymore. For someone that is starting from zero, promotion-wise, what are you going to do?
So under this challenge, presumably I'm not allowed to reach out to anybody that I already know and tell them this other person's me.
Yes, correct.
Because obviously that would circumvent the rules.
Yeah, you've got no connections.
The rules that you're making up as you go along.
Yes, exactly. You've got zero connections, and it's a new alias that you're not allowed to tell anyone, but I'm allowing you your previous production skills.
Right. So well, I mean, obviously the socials are a big part of that. So I think you've got to spend, it depends on, and also it depends on, if you're talking about it from an artistic point of view, then you've basically just got to build relationships in a kind of meaningful way, right? This idea of sort of like spamming people and just sending them stuff, I mean, you can send the same message pretty much to a bunch of people in terms of the sort of the body of the message, but you need to personalize it. You need to say, my advice would be like, be really specific about who you send stuff to, and actually spend. This is like, it's kind of serious. Like, you have to do it in a serious way. You can't just say, oh, all of these people are, oh, I'm making music that's close to what, I can't even think of anyone. I'm making music close to what Low Stepper makes. So I'm going to look at who Low Stepper's following on SoundCloud, and I'm going to send this music to every single person because it's all, because the chances are it'll be similar. Yeah, I wouldn't do that. I would basically make a list, narrow it down again, and then I'd actually listen to each of those. You're looking at like basically a week to do a process like this. But at the end of it, what you're going to have is like a really distilled list of really suitable people that you can then message personally and you can actually include something within the message that's relevant to them. So like, you know, say, oh, I just heard so-and-so track, you know, oh, I really like your last EP, and actually name the EP rather than just saying, I really love your last release.
Hi, insert DJ name here. I really loved your last insert EP name here.
Exactly. But actually listen to it. And, you know, and if it is something that you genuinely like, say that.
Yeah.
Because that just little bit of personalization goes a long way. And you may not hear anything from them, you know, on that occasion, but it's all about just engaging with people and building kind of meaningful relationships, whether that's long or short term.
Yeah.
You know, there are people now that I've spoken to, you know, 2 or 3 or 4 years ago that are now starting to do really good stuff. And because I kind of helped them back then, or like gave them some advice, and they really appreciate, oh, really, thanks for reaching out. I wasn't even expecting you to come back, and all that kind of stuff. It is about relationships, and obviously it's difficult to forge those in a more meaningful way when everything's done online. So a big part of the, you know, your process should be, if it's possible for you, to get out and go to events. The kind of things that you want to be playing at, you need to go to those events.
Yeah.
That's another way of doing it. You can give people USBs now. It's like, you know, the modern version of the CD. You can go out and give people those. And actually just supporting people, and again, contributing to the culture that you actually want to be a part of. So I think that's important too. Yeah,
100%. Like something that I was talking to Jack Mumdance about a little while ago, of that this whole notion of really embedding yourself in a scene and embedding yourself in a culture. And he was telling me about when he was, you know, getting into sort of grime and that sort of stuff in London. It's like, well, you just go to the radio stations or go to the parties, get to know the people from the stations, go and hang out at the stations, go and hang out at the parties and you know, and the clubs and everything, and, you know, for the live streams, for this and that. And if you're getting into it because you want to be in a scene, you want to be part of it, and you love it and you're passionate about it, you've got to go and put the hours in actually at the venues, with, you know, face to face with people as much as possible. Because that's how you're going to get, like, you legitimize yourself.
You have to build up a credibility and an authenticity, and it's the same with brands, and same with you know, with sample pack companies, and with anyone else who's doing kind of anything digitally now that's creative. It's like you have to establish yourself as an authority in that market, but not in a kind of like sort of facile, and like not in a way that, you know, is that doesn't have any authenticity. You have to actually, like, we're involved in this, and this is what we're passionate about, and we want to kind of share this information or share this knowledge and help other people be creative or whatever it might be. And I got into music just because I was never interested in, like, you know, when I started DJs weren't really, I mean, they were obviously popular, and they were kind of like looked up to by people that were into dance music. Like, you know, I would look up to like the Andy C's and the people like that when I was into, you know, drum and bass, and then when I was into jungle, it was all the big jungle DJs and so on and so forth. But I wasn't like, oh, I want to be up there because I want everyone to look at me. It was like, I want to be up there because I want that buzz of like playing music to people. And it was purely, and it always came from that place. And so the energy has to be right. And obviously over the years, it's kind of become like diluted a bit with people like, well, you know, I'm going to kind of become a bit of a celebrity with it because it's become so popular. But you have to get into it for the right reasons. And if you're getting into it for the right reasons, and you're into it for the right reasons, then investing in it, going out to nights, you know, supporting, listening to music every day. You're just, you know, you're putting mixes on, you're finding out what certain tracks are. You're understanding, you know, you're listening to the radio, whether that's like Pirate, you know, or whether it's Radio 1 or whatever, specialist mix shows, whatever it is you want to, what you're into, you're just kind of, you're living and breathing that every single day. And so once you start doing that, I think other people start to see that there's like a, you know, there's like a legitimate angle to what you're doing, and they're prepared to give you time, you know.
I mean, you know, passion just resonates with people. Like when I, you know, got into playing out drum and bass, like the reason that I wanted to go and DJ places was I had a record collection that I loved like it was a child. And like I thought these records were just the most amazing things that I'd ever heard. And, you know, what could possibly be better than being able to play those amazing records to a load of people that were going to ideally appreciate them as much as I did. and to be able to, you know, have that connection between, you know, a load of sweaty people dancing
and that's
with these amazing tunes.
That's what I love about dance music culture, because it is essentially it's a counterculture, right? And there's kind of like punk elements to it, you know, in the sense that a lot of the people that you meet are super creative. They're super kind of nice, empathetic. They've got a different way of looking at the world. You know, they kind of, you know, and I love that, because there's like a pride in it for me. There's a pride in like the fact that we kind of rejected the mainstream to a large degree. Although I'm embracing it a bit more these days.
But you got bills to pay, man.
But, you know, as you get older, I think it becomes less important. But when you're young, that energy, that passion, that enthusiasm that you've got to, like, get into and insert yourself into a culture like that, which is what I did kind of aggressively. I was DJing every weekend, you know, even if it was just for free at, like, a house party, I'd go and play and just buy records and, you know, and go to all the club nights I could and do everything that was within my power, make mixtapes, everything, invest in studio equipment, all that stuff. And I kind of took a pride in like the fact that me and my, you know, when everybody else was going out on like the main street, you know, to get as drunk as possible, we were interested in like, where are we going this weekend that has the thing that we want to be involved in. It wasn't about the venue. It wasn't like we go to the same bar every week like a lot of people do because that's their regular haunt. It was like, even if this club was crappy, we were like, oh, Bailey's going to be there. Ray Keith's going to be there, and so-and-so's going to be there doing a, you know, what's his, I forget his label.
Ray Keith's label, Dread,
doing a Dread night. Yeah, we're going there. You know, or Meltdown's on. We're going there. Wherever, you know, we were going to London. We were going to Maidstone. We were going to Hastings Pier. You know, we were going to the all-night raves and stuff. It was just like we looked at what was going on that we wanted to be a part of, and that was a part of us, and we went to that thing. And I took a pride in that. And that's how I've made some of my best friends. Almost all of my good friends are involved in some form of dance music in some way, whether that's as a DJ, a producer, a label owner, a developer. They all kind of, there's common threads that run through all of us, you know, and there's that kind of counterculture aspect, and there's that kind of like warmth and camaraderie and bond that you build with people through having these experiences. And that's kind of what I get off on, you know, in terms of what it means to me and why I've basically stayed in it for so long. Yeah,
it's, in a way, it's not dissimilar to playing on a sports team or something like that, or, you know, bonding with people over something that, I don't know, I've come out of drum and bass nights feeling a little bit like I've come out of a war. Like, you know, you go to something like therapy sessions, or, you know, one of those crazy hard drum and bass nights like that when I was living in Bristol, they were doing at the Black Swan, and therapy sessions at the Black Swan it really was like being in a war. You had these insane sound systems and these insane music and everyone getting wild.
Yeah.
And you're in there for 8 hours or something till 6 in the morning, and you all come out looking completely shell-shocked with a bizarre bond. Like, you know, like you've run one of those Tough Mudder races or something, but without getting dysentery like everyone did recently. Did you see that?
I didn't see that, no.
Yeah, you know those things where people they go under barbed wire and up hills and then through mud.
And they're covered at the end of it, right?
They're just completely rinsed out. They'd won, and they're like a load of silage or something from a neighbouring field had like flowed down because of a load of rain, and just everywhere. Loads of people got hospitalised.
Oh, God.
Yeah, it was an absolute disaster. So avoid them, Scott, if you are planning on some sort of...
Well, I do avoid them, as you can see.
What were we? Sorry, that was a real tangent there. Yeah, just the sort of the bonding that you have with your rave buddies, basically.
Yeah.
A real ragtag crew of misfits that you've somehow built up from a shared love of otherworldly music.
It really does bring people together. You know, it's one of the few. Music is one of the few. One of the, you know, maybe the only single, or one of the very few things that truly like just transcends everything, you know, mostly class, language, background, all these types of things. I've met people from all kinds of backgrounds, all kinds of colours, all kinds of languages, you know, gone to places in the world that I would never have ordinarily gone to, and all because of music.
Yeah.
And so, you know, that's kind of the culture that I sort of value. And so that's why I'm quite passionate when I say that people should pay into that culture something before they try and take out.
Yeah. I think a lot of people, you know, the rise of the superstar DJ over the last 10, 15 years, I think you know, who's to say whether or not people are getting into it for it's subjective to consider it the right or wrong reasons, but I think there's probably a lot of people that are just looking for that Facebook banner picture of them with their arms out.
Yeah, Jesus pose, yeah.
The Jesus pose in front of a crowd of whatever size, and that's the more important thing to them, or some social media numbers, or
I think
rather than like, I would be doing this anyway, even if you know, I knew I could not have any of those things.
And the focus now with the huge festivals and all that is kind of really put the DJ front and center, but it never. I mean, the DJ generally would always be sort of somewhere up there and in the middle, and, you know, maybe a bit higher up than you, or depending on what the venue was, of course. But it was never really about being the center of attention.
Yeah.
It was just, you know, I mean, I'd be quite happy just to DJ in a room that was really dark where no one could see me.
Right, well, with recent events, Scott, I'm not surprised.
And most people would probably be happy with that.
You get a lot more bookings.
So, yeah.
Oh, God, I wasn't going to bring that up, and I think we can move on from this.
We successfully
spurious gossip.
Yeah.
When you did, so you've been in America for the last how many years now?
4 years.
4 years.
Yeah.
Okay, come on, let's talk differences American club scene and UK club scene.
Right.
Of which there are many. There
are many, so I'll try and keep it concise, but it's not my strong point. The first major difference is the geography.
Yeah.
I mean, just the geography of the place is so different from here, and it's connected in, you know, such a different way that presents a massive challenge straight away. Because over here, as a DJ, you can do 2, 3, 4 gigs in a night. I mean, 4 might be pushing it, but if they were close enough together and it was like...
If you're Nicky Black Market, I reckon you can do it.
Yeah, and especially if it was like a New Year's Eve or something like that, where things run later and longer, and, you know, but you can do 3 gigs in a night if you played in, like, you know, Bristol, Sheffield, London, something like that, right? But over there, everything's a plane ride, basically, from where you are. Unless you live near a major city. But we've got lots of major cities that are next to each other. You know, Manchester and Liverpool are 20 minutes apart, and they're both like major cities, right? And they have their own scenes and their own, you know, nightlife and their own populations and all of that. Well, where I was sort of staying in Philadelphia, the nearest major city to that is Pittsburgh, and it's 5 hours drive away. So it's kind of the equivalent of Manchester and Liverpool being 5 hours apart.
Yeah.
So, you know, the people that, if you play in Philadelphia, the people that are coming to see you, some of them have travelled an hour or an hour and a half. That's kind of the equivalent of, you know, going to London to see somebody play, which of course we all do, but we don't have to go to London to get nightlife. Yeah. We can stay here and get it in Brighton and see a whole range of, like, most likely on most weekends, very good acts. Or we can go to London and see a sort of slightly bigger range of good acts, or much bigger range of good acts, or we could go to Bristol and it's only a couple of hours away, and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
So that presents a challenge, because not only does it mean you can only do 1 gig in a night, it also means that getting to that gig involves more expense either to you or to the promoter, depending on how you figure it out. So what that means is if they have a budget to pay you, then that budget's gonna, you know, they're taking your flights, so you're taking your flights out of that money.
Yep.
Whereas over here, you know, the cost of getting around is less because you can train it or drive it or whatever. So all of those things play into the economics of it. And also over there, unless you're doing big festivals and stuff, the fees generally are a bit lower than they are here.
Yep.
Because the whole culture around dance music and clubbing is different, because people can't drink until they're 21.
Yeah.
Over here, you can drink when you're 18, of course. So when you're at university and you're having that first taste of freedom, going out to the local nightlife, if you live in a city like this, is a big part of that. It's a big part of your growing up and, You know, why do you think that all of the major promoters in a big city go to the university for Freshers Week and set their stall up?
Yep.
You know, to tell all the new students, hey, look, this is what we've got going on. You should come out.
We've got dance music and alcohol.
Exactly.
Come to us at the weekend.
Yeah, and you're having this first taste of like being away from home and probably living out of home for the first time. And, you know, it's a very, very experiential, formative time of your life between 18 and 21 or 22. Now, if you compare that to being in the US, you can't drink till you're 21, which is why there's this huge culture of like college dorm parties.
Yeah.
Because then you're staying in and drinking, which is obviously much less risky than going out and drinking underage.
Yeah.
And it's kind of frowned upon over there. You know, that we have a different drinking culture in this country.
We certainly do. I think the UK drinking culture is fairly unique, although it may cross over to Australia.
That's true, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So because of that, you know, there are lots of... So you're less exposed to club culture because you can't go to clubs.
Yeah. Oh,
right?
well, I found it...
I mean, you can go when you're 18 to some things and not drink.
Yeah.
But it's not everything that allows you to do that. It has to be kind of a specific allowance at that event.
This was something that I discovered when on my first US tour, was clubs that you could get into when you were 18, but you couldn't drink in them until you were 21. So there was a sort of weird segregation situation going on in the club, whereby the bar was segregated off and you could only drink alcoholic drinks in the segregated bit by the bar,
right,
which wasn't the dance floor. And then obviously you had to go outside if
like
you wanted to smoke.
It was like bar-apartheid.
Yes, no, basically. And then you had to go outside to smoke. So you had this really weird club dynamic of these three very separate areas, some people not being able to get into others, you not being able to bring drinks onto the dance floor. So if you wanted to have a drink, you then had to go drink it in the bar and then go back to the dance floor. And I mean, I don't want to say the smoking ban killed dance like club culture in the UK, but it made a marked difference.
Oh, massive, yeah. I mean, you'd be playing sometimes and you'd think, what have I done?
Yeah, what have I played a real bad
a quarter of the room has just disappeared, but it would just and it ends up just being like just flowing in and out.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I think that makes a big difference. The drinking age plays a part in what you're exposed to in terms of culture. Also, radio is a huge part of it. You know, radio is very corporate controlled in America, and a lot of them, there are not a lot of independent radio stations and or shows, unless they're things that are syndicated that you might hear. But you know, but we've got radio. I mean, even obviously, Radio 1 is a public broadcaster, but it's been championing dance music for years and years and years.
Yeah,
it's like kind of iconic for that, you know. And we've had amazing people like John Peel who've kind of like played everything, including dance music. And so there's this kind of rich history of doing that. And obviously Radio Caroline with Pirate. I mean, Pirate Radio is completely unique in the UK pretty much in terms of how much influence it's had on culture and on and underground dance music. You know, essentially certain scenes were just spread from being on illegal radio and doing club nights. Yeah. And if you look at, you know, stations like Kiss and Rinse that started out as pirates and now they're legal, I mean, I said this to Spoonie on his show as well, there's almost nowhere else in the world where that could happen.
Didn't Rinse get its license on its 16th birthday or something?
I think so, yeah.
It became legal. Something hilarious about
So that's a big part of it. You know, and this is why festival culture has exploded in the US. Because if something takes you, if you're going to drive 2 hours to go and see Claude Von Stroke, right, or somebody play, then why wouldn't you just drive 5 hours and stay for 3 days? Yeah. And instead of paying $30 to see one act, you pay $300 and you get to see like 50 or 60 DJs and you stay for 3 days. Yeah. Especially with the way, you know, drink driving and all that kind of thing. It's like you've got to drive to these things. So that's a huge part of the culture. Whereas over here, we don't really have that quote problem because I mean, public transport is great. You can get everywhere easily. And you know, you can go out on Brighton seafront and be home for the cost of like 10 quid in 10 minutes. You know, so it just facilitates everything being closer together and more condensed. Just facilitates people going out and enjoying themselves a lot more. Yeah, and they can do it from when they, you know, if you get into dance music when you're 18, there's a lot better chance that you'll fall in love with it and it will become a part of your life, and you'll want to keep doing those things in your early 20s, mid 20s, maybe late 20s. If you don't, and you're just, you know, like by the time, I mean, in America, when you come out of college at 21 or 22, you're probably in quite a lot of debt and you have to join the real world straight away. You don't have that opportunity of just being like 18, 19, 20 and going out to student nights and, you know, or your local club or whatever, you know, getting in free before 11 or whatever it is, you know, and becoming immersed in this culture. You never get that chance because as soon as you turn 21 or 22, your parents in America are like, you better go and get a job because you've got quite a lot of debt.
Hundreds of grand's worth of debt.
Yeah, and you need to start living in the real world now.
Yeah.
And so there's just that little window of opportunity that we have here that I think is part of it. And obviously radio plays a part, drug culture plays a part, geography plays a part, and all of those things combined, you know, kind of make up the differences between US and UK club culture. And as I said a moment ago, that's why the festival culture has taken off the way it has.
Yeah.
Because it makes so much more sense to just go somewhere for 3 days if it's going to take you hours to get there anyway. Why not drive a bit longer, stay there for 3 days, have a great time, you know, not need to worry about driving, traveling, anything like that. And then at the end of the 3 days, you go home, you know.
I remember a weird thing which has I've only ever happened in America, but happened at a couple of clubs, which is where you could get in when you were 18. Was the club being almost completely empty until about 5 minutes before I went on, and me sort of started looking around like the promoter was like, "What's going on? Why is there no one in it? Like I thought you sold out tickets." It's like, "Oh yeah, well." Everyone's drinking in the parking lot. They're gonna and they will all come in at once. 5 minutes before you go on.
They call it tailgating.
Really?
Yeah, because they use the tailgate of the cars or the van, and they do it when they go to American football games. They're allowed to actually go to the car park of like a stadium, like the Philadelphia Eagles stadium, and they bring all their booze, and they even do barbecues and cookout and stuff there. It's pretty crazy, and that's a massive part. They call it pre-gaming.
Yes.
Or tailgating, and it's a massive part of the culture. But another thing just quickly as well is that a lot of nights you go to in America, if you're playing, you're the headliner, you're the only headliner.
Yeah.
You're the only person kind of name or note playing there. The other guys are like residents or locals. And over here, again, that's the thing. You know, we're used to like seeing stacked lineups.
Yeah.
You know, we can go to an event and you'll see 5, 6 really well-known DJs. Even the person that's warming up, like, is probably quite well known. But over there, because of again cost and geography, and you know, they're bringing people into tour, so they can only afford to get one DJ on that lineup and all of that. But again, which is why festival culture is great, because they can go and see a whole lineup of really, you know, well-known DJs versus what they would get at their local like Friday or Saturday night. So that makes a difference as well, I think. Yeah,
I heard from someone out there was saying to me like what you can focus on though as a DJ in America is just trying to get big in just one state.
Absolutely, yeah, that's a huge challenge in and of itself. But yeah, if you can, and it's interesting that that before the advent of, I mean, we've obviously got over here we've got pockets of scenes within certain pockets, like, you know, the Bristol, what we consider to be the Bristol sound, or like, you know, Portishead and all of that, right? And then you've got like a lot of prominent drum and bass DJs and producers from Bristol, right?
Full cycle lot,
Full cycle and those guys. And then you've got, you know, Sheffield. We had like the bassline scene and niche, and then you've got
of course,
London,
I completely forgot about all
you know, all that kind of thing. So everywhere had their own kind of scene, and in the US you had that too, but kind of to a sort of almost greater degree in some ways, where you had like the New York, New Jersey sound was huge. That kind of what you consider that New York sort of deep house, like Kerry Chandler, Nervous Records, Masters at Work. Then you'd have the Chicago, which is kind of like that jack-in kind of, you know, Time for the Percolator, like that kind of vibe. And then you had the West Coast sound, which was kind of like smooth, deep house, kind of like, you know, Miguel Miggs, Joey Youngman, you know, that kind of thing. So it's interesting how all these places had their own kind of distinct kind of influences, and obviously that's become a bit more meshed now with the way people can share music and everything a bit more quickly, whereas before it was a bit harder to do that.
I remember doing some shows in Nottingham years and years and years ago when there was that sort of resurgence of, so I'm guessing this is probably going 2007 maybe, there was that sort of like the niche garage sort of thing, and
Sean Banger Scott and Jamie Duggan and all those guys,
and they were having big problems with violence at these nights.
Well, that's why niche got shut down in Sheffield, because they had too much trouble. But
they kept changing the name of the genre so that venues would let them book it. Oh no, it's bassline house. Oh no, it's niche garage. Oh, it's this type of garage. It was just the same thing.
Some people used to call it up north.
Really?
Up north garage.
Right. And they just had, and there was a similar deal with grime where like, oh no, we're not putting on grime notes. Oh, it's not grime, it's something
UK rap.
Yeah, something like that. It's just like the same boys in bloody puffer jackets turn up and cause trouble.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's it's funny that because a lot of the guys who are doing garage at around 2005, when I was talking about when me. Huxley was doing stuff under another name. Taurus was doing stuff under another name. That was, there was like the Wide Boys. Wide Boys were still active as well and doing stuff, and they were doing those kind of baseline mixes as part of their like packages. They would do like 4 mixes, and one of them would kind of cater for that market. So I actually knew quite a lot of people. DJ Q, who's really big, part of TQD. Yeah. He's done amazingly well over the last few years. He was part of that kind of. He's actually from Huddersfield,
right?
So you got all that kind of royalty and Butters and all of that. They're all Elijah and Skilly, and they're all kind of from that general area: Sheffield, Huddersfield, Midlands or up north.
I remember Jack Mumdance again sending me loads of this stuff back in those times. I'll listen to all these bits, and loads of stuff was ripped off of mixes. Like they would rip the track out of a mix. And often would like repeat a bit at the end, so as that like you could hear another tune coming in, and they were all like WMA files, like Windows Media Audio files or stuff. I was like, people are DJing with these, and there'd be like really low bit rate ripped out of a mix.
I hope we never go back to those days when it would come up with you need to install Real Player to play this file.
God, can you imagine? I was playing a record on my Rankin's Records show the other day, which was a high contrast bootleg of Papua New Guinea.
Oh yeah.
And the pressing that I've got of it was ripped from the beginning of a mix, and then in the after the second drop, you can hear towards the end of it a John B bootleg of New Order being mixed into it, and it's like this sort of bootleg on bootleg action. It's like the most illegal record ever made. 2 bootlegs ripped off a mix, cut together,
and it itself was a bootleg.
Yeah, like so one-sided as well, obviously. It's like, it's hilarious.
I mean, one side, that just really rubs it in as well. Doesn't
it? Like, it's something I quite like a one-sider.
Oh yeah, I mean you're committing
really
to it.
Obnoxious,
you're committing to it, aren't you? You're saying, look, I know I'm kind of.
It's a dick move, isn't it?
Yeah.
But like, I don't know, something quite special.
But you're saying
it.
I believe in this.
This tune has my full backing that I don't even need to press the same track on the other side. Like just one side to do it. People can decorate the other side maybe with a compass. Or like I think I even did that on a few. Oh God. I would quite like to press some more vinyl, but enough a hassle these days.
It is, and the waiting times are kind of crazy at the moment, aren't they?
Yeah, because loads of people are pressing vinyl again. I would, it's coming back, but in a weird way.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? Like it's loads of people are doing it, but it's a lot of people are buying vinyl for almost like it's merch.
Yeah. Yeah, and people, it's almost, and I've noticed a lot of places are doing, that are selling merch, and then doing kind of vinyl was like almost an afterthought. It's like, buy this T-shirt and these stickers and you also get a vinyl. And so people are just like, yeah, okay, great, but they might not even play the vinyl, or that might not even be the focus. The focus might be on getting the other stuff first, and then the vinyl just comes as part of it. But the last thing I was reading about it was just saying that the plants can't keep up with the demand. So because I've got a couple of things coming out this year on vinyl with a couple of different labels, but you're looking at like summer before anything kind of. Yeah. And to be honest, even if something says it's coming out at the beginning of July, it'll probably be 4 or 5
weeks. End of August. Yeah, come on.
There's probably going to be a delay in that.
Yeah.
So
Scott, hold on 1 second. I'm going to go and shut that door out there because I can hear an awful racket coming from next door, and then I want to talk to you about some production.
Let's do it.
No matter how much you tell people that they need to keep their doors shut, they don't keep their doors shut.
People don't listen, do they?
They just don't listen. You know, you're trying to be nice to them. You're trying to, be helpful and respectful of their digital radio station, and they leave their doors wide open and play their music at full volume. Scott, talk to me about what records you're making now. You're making house.
Making house, yeah. So just did a remix of Everybody Loves the Sunshine, which is obviously the classic Roy Ayers record. It was covered by Nova Frontera, which is a producer called Michele Schiavarini.
Right.
He's like an amazing keyboard player from Italy, and does like loads of keys for people. I think he played like does the music on a lot of like people's tracks in the house world, and maybe other areas too. But yeah, he signed this track to Seamus Haji's Big Love or Soul Love label.
Right.
It came out a good few years ago now, but it was like a perfect remake. Essentially he's replayed all the music and everything like that, and it's like an iconic record anyway, the Roy Ayers one. He's got these amazing Moog parts and string parts and stuff. So Seamus, Big Love is 15 years old this year. So he's doing kind of a selection of remixes to kind of celebrate that. So he asked me to do that one. So I've just finished that recently. That's going to come out in June. I'm working on some stuff for Defected as well, like some demos and ideas with them, but bouncing back and forth about vocalists and stuff.
Right.
So I want to get into start writing more songs, basically. I've been doing loads of remixes for years, and that's great in a way because it gives you a chance to kind of put your interpretation on somebody else's work. And there's not a lot of art forms where where you can actually do that. The remix is kind of unique and sort of, you don't get like, I mean, you might get people now it happens more than it used to, with like people can take something and do their own version of it, and obviously videos and memes and stuff like that are a part of that. But
you don't get it really in any other. I mean, you can do. I guess people would do pastiches, and
right? But you don't get somebody doing like, this is a serious reinterpretation of the Mona Lisa, and it's going to stand alongside the Mona Lisa as being a serious. Like, you're not going to get an art gallery that's going to put it up and be like, this is part of the package. You know.
You also you don't get that in things like comedy, for example, where you go like, oh, here's this Ricky Gervais bit, but I've thought of some like additional funny bits that maybe he could have said, and so I made the
intro longer.
I'm gonna do a few tags on the end of his jokes. Like, it's something that is very exclusive to.
And so because of that, I kind of like it. And some of my favorite tracks ever, not that I've made, but just generally, are remixes. And so I love the way you can kind of take something and present it to a different audience.
Yeah.
So not that I get asked to do it much now, but I would love to do more stuff that is remixing stuff that's not house to start with, and making house mixes out of it. But I get a lot of kind of house mixes, like, can you do a remix of this track that's already house? So you have to go in a different direction.
I think that's really the way the remix comes into its own, because if you're just like, well, this is already house and I'm going to do slightly different house with it, it's not the same as like, oh, well, this is a sort of pop ballad, like a really emotive pop ballad, and I'm going to maintain the sort of emotive majesty of it, but then put a whole load of low-end monster underneath that comes in, and suddenly it changes the whole dynamic of the song, and really
thinking of like if you think of like In for the Kill, like the Screen mix,
exactly,
or you think of like Todd Terry mix of Everything But the Girl, or the Armand Van Helden mix of Spin Spin Sugar. These were tracks like Tori Amos' Professional Widow. I mean, one of the best remixes ever. He just took one section of the bass guitar part stem that he'd been given, and this was a slow track originally, and it was kind of like, I mean, if you've ever listened to the original of Tori Amos's Professional Widow, I recommend you do, because it's kind of weird, the track. It's like an odd track, because Tori Amos obviously is kind of like, she's got a certain sound like Kate Bush and that kind of thing, and is very kind of like a bit, sort of a bit what you consider to be left field, right? It wasn't like traditional pop or R&B or anything like that, and so to take something like that and then transform it into what it became is kind of like the true art of the remix, and there's countless other examples of things like that. So that's a nice challenge, but I don't get a lot of those. I'd like to do more of them. But
kind of what you see. Ideally, just if everyone could send you like really amazing, iconic, records of different genres, and you'll just zhuzh them up a bit.
That'd be great. Yeah.
And if they wouldn't mind paying you a load of money at the same time,
that'd be great.
What was the one I was thinking of? Our Hometown Glory, Adele, the high contrast mix of that.
Yeah.
Or things where. Yeah, you can just completely take it out of its
because it gives you loads of room, because it's not already a dance record to start with. So like if you're working in whatever you're doing, drum and bass, house, garage, there's 4 or 5 different directions you can go in depending on what that vocal gives you, right? But if you're doing a house record and someone's like, well, I've already done kind of like this UK deep house, you know, it's like a Disclosure-esque record to start with, let's say, then you can't do a mix that's like that. Otherwise, you're just rehashing what's already been done. You have to go somewhere else. So your options become more and more limited, because they might say, well, we want you to use all the vocal. Right, well, it means I can't do that. I can't do a, you know, I can't mess around with the vocal and twist it and manipulate it and make it almost unrecognizable and turn it into like a really credible underground thing, or like do some really like mad burial stuff with the vocals and pitch them and stretch them. They'll be like, no, we don't want you to do that because we want you to keep the full vocal as it is. Okay, and then you have to work within those constraints. So it's, you know, and that it does help you in some way. Well, it does teach you in some ways, I should say, because you have to work within certain constraints. So, you know, making music to me over the years, I've kind of refined it down to like, it's essentially about improving your listening and about improving the way you make small decisions. So everything you do is a small decision, even though you don't realize it at the time. And the better your ears become, and the more accurately you can interpret the information, you know, going into your ears, then up to your brain, and make decisions about like what that sounds like, and the more accurate you can be with that, the more good decisions you'll make, and you know, all those little decisions add up to what becomes the final product at the end. And I think as you progress as a producer and as a musician, as a music maker, you get better at doing those things. And that's kind of the gap, basically. And
you get better at being able to translate the sound that is in your head into actually coming out of your speakers. Like, this was what, I mean, it took me years and years and years. Of course, now I think the learning curve isn't as steep now, because there's so much good stuff out there in terms of tutorials and information. Whereas when we started, like, kind of pre-internet, really. And certainly, you know, no YouTube, no tutorials, anything like that. But the other great thing with the remix and with the bootleg is that you can, if you're a good producer but you're struggling to get yourself out there, it can be a really good way of
massive
like what was the one that sprang to mind, that Cyril Hahn Destiny's Child one that's taken him from, I mean, it was a sort of semi-established producer, but sort of, you know, nothing in comparison to what he was like 6 months after dropping that bootleg. It's insane. Like, everyone's like, I have friends that aren't even into dance music playing that, and it's, you know, you can really, really do yourself some favours by creating an amazing bootleg. You know, as long as you're sort of respectful with it in a way, and it's
some of the
some terrible bootlegs.
Some of the when we were talking about garage vinyl, about vinyl sales earlier, and I mentioned some of the biggest records. Some of the biggest house records and garage records over the years have been bootlegs. You know, some of the, I mean, if you think about something like Stardust, Music Sounds Better With You, that was a bootleg to start off with. I'm sure it must have been, because, you know, I can't imagine that they would have licensed. I mean, Roulette signed it in the end, but you know, but my point is that it was a sample, and so, like, you know, they've taken, you know, when they made it, when they took the sample, they hadn't cleared it, put it that way. They didn't start working on it after they'd cleared it. They did it, and then obviously they judged what they'd done, and then it was decided, well, we should either put this out or we should clear this, then put this out. And I'm not sure if it was on another label first and then got signed to Roulette, or whether it's, or I think Roulette I'm not sure if what's his name, Bangalter is involved in Roulette, whether it was a separate label. That he had nothing to do with, but, you know, assigned it to, because he had a bunch of stuff out on that label. But anyway, the point I'm making in a wider context is that there was tons of stuff that was bootlegged, R&B bootlegs over the top of things, and, you know, R&B acapellas over the top of things.
Those are your sort of go-to, really, ones, because the R&B acapellas were so
but they were
easy
plentiful.
To get.
The American imports. I remember spending sometimes like £12 or £13 on an American import of something that was completely sealed in HMV, and it had an acapella on it, and you couldn't listen to it, but you were just like, I hope this has some gold, because I'm going to do a bootleg of it, you know.
Or buying, off eBay, like 10,000 hip-hop acapellas on 4 gigs of DVDs. Like, £8, okay, go on then.
And then you just never even get get round listening to half of it. It was just a challenge.
Absolute garbage. So what are you using now? What's your rig?
So now my setup is, I work predominantly in Logic X. I do most of my mixing in that. Well, all my mixing in that basically. I've got a few things. I've got a few other DAWs. I've got Fruity Loops actually. I don't really
FL Studio.
Yeah, FL Studio. I should say. They actually gave me a license for that.
Yeah,
they were pretty sweet about that. I haven't really delved into it too much, but I remember years ago I made a track in Fruity Loops as it was then. I made a track in it in like half a day, and for me that's really quick.
Yeah.
And I kind of liked the drum, like the sequencer, like the way you could lay the drums out and stuff. It was kind of really intuitive to me. It had a kind of a groove box sort of feel to it.
Yeah.
And so I liked that, and you could add like cool swing, and I made like a two-step garage track, and it was like 2005.
The swing was just there. It was right there.
And I loved that, and so I kind of, all these years, I still kind of think about that now. When I think about it, I think, oh, I did kind of get something quite good at it. Maybe I would like it.
Back to Fruity Loops.
So I've got it, but I don't do too much in it, and I use Machine a lot too.
Yeah.
Machine, basically, I start kind of all my ideas in Machine.
Sorry, Machina.
Machina, sorry, I should say. Yeah, I basically use that as kind of a sketching palette.
Right. Okay.
And I'll basically have all my sounds sort of available, the one shots and stuff like that, and then I'll. Because up until recently, it was not really good at handling loops or like whatever. Now they've got the audio thing,
not very good for arranging.
Which is the arrangement is kind of the letdown for it. But then I would basically just drag things out into audio and in Logic. So what I do is I have Machine running as a plugin inside Logic, and I have that set up as like a starting template. And then I just start jamming in Machina, and I basically lay my drums out, and I add like little vocal snippets or hits, whatever chords, play some stuff, whatever it might be, and then I kind of refine it and decide what I'm going to keep and whatever. I used to drag the audio out. Now what I actually do is I've created another template that sits inside Machine that's also open when you open the Logic one, and that basically is like a layout with all the scenes set out, 16-bar scenes.
Okay.
And what I do is I then just duplicate it over and they have a new function called Make Unique. I don't know if you've seen that, but it's really helpful. So what it means is you can copy over an entire scene, and all that scene has all the patterns for a particular part. So the intro scene might just be like some drums and like a vocal snippet, right, filtering in. Well, now you can copy that over, and you can just click Make Unique, and it will create new patterns for each of those. So you can change the bits in that scene individually of any other scene, because that was always the problem. You change it on one scene and that pattern repeats earlier on. You've also changed that one.
Yeah.
So I think that's a really helpful feature. So I do that, and then what that allows me to do is, when you're talking about these last-minute kick drum changes or pitch or tuning changes, you can actually, instead of committing to like having this kick drum, at a certain pitch, at certain transients with certain processing, and you drag it out into Logic and then you dump it as audio, you can just mute the Machine, and you can keep the drums as they are in case you need to go back to them. But it means you've got to get rid of all that audio, that track, all the audio on that track, and redo it again. Whereas this way now, I basically have it running live in Machine, and it actually mirrors the point that the track is playing at, right? So if I'm in bar 32 or 33 in Logic, as long as I have the whole thing playing inside Machina, the software, it is at the same point. So it means you can do really cool things like mess around with the drum fills more and edits and do kind of subtle velocity changes, and that kind of stuff, matters to me because I like the detail, and like the kind of humanism is like important with a lot of the stuff that I do, especially the more like I've been doing a lot more kind of jazzier deep house stuff, and that the focus is like more on it kind of being a bit more sloppy and a bit more live feeling, and and being able to edit the drums, just subtle things like taking one hi-hat out here and there is just what turns it into a track rather than just being a loop over and over and over again.
Well, particularly if you've got like a 9-10 minute long track, like that isn't going through loads and loads of changes. All those little subtle movements within hi-hats and shakers and little bits here, they slightly trick the ear.
That's what they call an ear reset.
Yeah.
So like if you drop the kick out for like for 2 beats or a bar, when it comes back in, or you have some effect swell or something, it kind of is like lets the listener know that something's about to happen or some change is about to occur. And so when that, when that kick drum comes back in, your ear is effectively reset.
Yeah.
You know, or the brain is reset at that point. So it's really helpful. It seems like such a small thing, but it does make a big difference, because obviously dance music, a lot of it is based around the impact and the kind of the power of you know, the kick and everything translating into energy, so, and being a foundation for everything else to sit on. So just taking that out kind of gives you that temporary, and then you're waiting for that you know, that moment to happen again. So those kind of things are important. And maybe I'm, you know, the 80-20 rule is something that I'm aware of, but I don't know how much I kind of apply it to my own stuff.
Well, I mean, God, you can apply it to so many different sort of things with your track. Like you're saying that, what, 20% of the elements of your track are giving 80% of the enjoyment to the listener?
Possibly, but also you can say, like, you know, but basically the last 20% of a track is potentially only going to be noticed or appreciated by certain people. Yeah. So that last 20% that you do might not get you an extra 20% of benefit.
I hate that last 20%.
Me too.
I'm going to be honest with you. All the last 5% even more. I really envy other people when I listen to their tracks and they don't do things like use crash cymbals or effects or down, you know, like impacts on breakdowns and stuff. Because when I do it in my tracks, I hate. But if I miss them out in my tracks, I hate it, and I have to go back in and do those things, because that's like the sonic spice to me. Yeah, I can't have a drop without a crash on it.
That's the glue that holds everything together and makes it feel like a finished record to me.
Yeah.
But then I hear all these amazing tunes that just sound great in a club, that they're just like, none of that stuff matters. It's just, to them, they're just like, it's all about the vibe of this. You know, and we have to be careful, like, well, I have to be careful that if you overproduce something, you can lose that initial, you know, I've had that plenty of times, which is why I kind of,
that's what I tell myself when I start getting bored and thinking, maybe I should just wrap this up now. You know, I don't want to overdo it. I don't want to over-egg the pudding. Like, really, am I being lazy? Am I just being ADHD, and like I lose interest and attention span in a track if I've been working on it for more than 2 days?
Yeah,
and then you have that internal battle with yourself of like,
it doesn't sound finished to me. But then when I hear other people's tracks, I'm not like, oh, this
isn't finished.
Yeah, I just think it sounds great, you know. Yeah. So I think there's definitely something to be learned for myself there, and it's kind of constant, you know, constant sense of sort of improvement. But
with those, this is going to sound like a fairly incongruent segue, but with those little subtle changes that you have throughout a track that sort of trick the ear a little bit, particularly in very long kind of progressive tracks, have you heard about the development that goes into Doritos crisps?
No.
So a Dorito, you bite into it and you taste it.
This sounds like a really terrible sponsorship pitch, doesn't
it? No, this is not product placement. There are many other crisps available. You bite into it and you taste.
You're like, have you ever noticed that a Dorito looks a bit like a kick drum waveform?
And you just taste the Dorito. But what you don't realise is millions of pounds of development has gone into this to put these tiny little subtle flavours in that you don't even notice yourself tasting. But what they do is that they trick your brain into thinking that the taste is subtly different every time.
Okay.
But with it actually sort of generally tasting the same. Because otherwise you'd get half a pack in and you'd be bored of the taste. Like if you try and eat a whole load of apple, you're really bored of the taste of apple before you can consume so many apples that you feel really sick.
Yeah.
Doritos, on the other hand, you can keep stuffing those things in you for hours until you realise, oh no, I've done 2 packs or something, because they have these little tricks of the flavour. And it's kind of the same thing with, if you're making a 10-minute long techno track that doesn't do much because it's designed to be played in a club, it's just different. Like the way you approach like a really long techno track that you're going to play at Berghain versus a drum and bass track that is probably only going to be played for 2.5 minutes, is that if you make it too wild and different, then you sort of you overwhelm people with it. Whereas really little subtle bits, you think if you were to just flick through it, you'd be like, this is the same thing.
Right, and that's kind of a bugbear with promos. You know, if I listen through a promo and I flick to 4 different parts and it all sounds the same, I'm like, there's no development in this. It's not going anywhere. It's not musically exciting. But yeah, and I think the thing is as species, I think, you know, and as music listeners, there's obviously something appealing that goes right to our kind of primal brain about music. And I've got a great book on it. Well, I've got 2 great books on it. One's called The Music Instinct, and one's called This Is Your Brain on Music. And I'd recommend that people read those. But it kind of like, it's about the science of like why we're obsessed with music and why we kind of like the patterns and melodies and all this kind of stuff. But I think we respond to like humanism as well in music. We respond to the idea that like that it's kind of, it's live and it's not kind
perfect,
of like and you know, and that's why like I've been trying to like research getting more into doing live stuff in terms of like just having, you know, 16 bars like sketched out. That's a cool idea, and have it basically mixed pretty much there, and then just jamming with it for like 10 minutes, and then just taking 6 of the best minutes of that. But then you can kind of do live filtering and do live breakdowns, you know, and then essentially I reckon I could probably write like 5 tracks in a day if I could do it that way, because I come up with the idea and a vibe kind of quickly, like within in Machina, because that's why I love it, because it is that sketch box that just allows me to like get a really cool groove down, and I use sounds and do things in different ways that I would never do it in Logic. So it works great for that, but then that next part is the struggle. That next part is like, right, how do I turn this into like a cohesive record?
Yeah.
And at the point that I'm at now in my career with like what I'm doing and kind of like what people expect of me, it's like everything has to be really good, you know? And so you put this pressure on yourself that it's like, I don't make tunes that like I make 10 and release 2. I work on something until it's ready to be released. So if that means, so it's good enough to be released rather. So if that means I rework the idea 5 times, that's what I do.
Yeah.
It might, you know, it might be a different track, but if it's called the same thing, I'm like, well, I just worked on it. But I think there's a big part of that that's at play as well. And we kind of like that, the human element to it. So that's why I think it appeals to me.
Well, remember, you're only as good as your last crap dubstep release.
Exactly.
So,
and the problem is, it's hard to make classic record, you know, like
it's just like, I think today I'm going to go to the studio, I'm going to make something classic. I'm
you
going
know,
to make a classic record.
But it's kind of, you put that pressure on yourself to be like, every day you're in the studio, every week I have to make a house classic or a garage classic.
That only increases the longer you make records for, that your demand on yourself becomes higher and higher, and it's I think it's a real battle within one's brain, that if you can try and put that to one side, because that's is only stifling creativity.
Yeah, well, but yeah, they say what do they call it? Perfection is the enemy of finished, you know, or whatever.
That's certainly true.
Yeah. But it's like, yeah, you do put that pressure on yourself. And the funny thing is, in the early, when there's this kind of horrible point that you get to, I think, or kind of less pleasant point in your music career, where at the beginning you're kind of just, you're learning and you know it's not great. It's what they call the gap. There's a lecture on it. There's a guy talking, I forget his name, but it's about the gap between like your taste and your talent. So, right? And you've got killer taste, so you know what is good music and you know what you want it to sound like. It's what you were talking about, getting it to sound what it sounds like in your head. That's the gap. You're trying to shorten that gap between what your talent is and what your taste is. You're trying to get your talent to align with your taste, so that you know that when something's good, you've managed to make it to a point where you're like, this is really good now.
Yeah.
Because if you know that you know good music and you know you've got good taste, then you're kind of relying on yourself to like make that judgment that like, okay, this is close to that now, or this is there. And for a while you're struggling to get there, and you're kind of just making music, and a lot of it's throwaway, and you won't finish things, and you know it's not very good, but you finish it anyway and move on to the next thing, and that's great to do.
Yeah.
But then you reach this point where the standard now has been set for you, but you're not busy enough or established enough to slow down making music. So when you get to a certain level, you basically can put out, like now, I think, with the way people tour and the way the industry is, you can probably put out 4 or 5 releases a year, 4 releases a year. Really, let's say you released a 2 or 3 track EP 4 times a year on the biggest labels in your area. You know, if you're making like certain, if you release on Never Say Die or Mad Decent or Defected or Tool Room, right? Whatever your area is, you have 4 releases on labels of that nature, and an odd remix or 2 for high profile artists, like a Sam Smith or someone like that. Then, and you're touring in between, which is also doing the other part of the job for you. then you get more time to work on that music. You can get things right in terms of the original productions and EPs, because you are then having people saying to you, look, this is not going to come out until it's ready. And as long as you get one out around every 3 months, we're going to be good. But before you reach that point, you have almost got to saturate the market, and you've got to, but you've got to saturate the market with all really, really good stuff.
Yeah, but so you need to like tune a week at that point.
You don't yet have that luxury of being like, I've got 3 months to make this EP. And I've got to make 3 tracks. So you know, you have that kind of more unpleasant middle point. And that's when you put a lot of pressure on yourself, because you're like, everything's got to be, I'm trying to make a record that's going to change everything for you every week. You know?
God, but you really do have to. You have to keep up that heat and be as prolific as possible with high quality stuff. Just like, hey, look, because I don't know, particularly at that, when you're at that slightly lower level, your music is just by its very nature more throwaway. So when you put something up and people are like, wow, this is great, you've probably got 2 weeks out of that.
Yeah.
And then you need to be like, yeah, and this. And they're like, oh, but this as well. Wow, okay, yeah, all right, yeah. And then another 2 weeks pass, and your socials are going down, and you know, oh, and this, and you've got to get to that point, and then you know, you maybe you get some stuff out on some more significant labels, and they're like, yeah, you can't be putting out a tune a week anymore.
And then I think you then have to then focus on other things as well, because not only are you touring a lot more and DJing a lot more, and that takes up so much time with the traveling and everything, but you're then focusing on the DJing side more, because you're then doing things like, well, I'm going to do a whole bunch of remixes and edits for my sets.
Yeah.
Because now that's become really important, this idea that like everybody's got access to the same music. So how do you stand out, even though you might be playing a lot of that same music? How can I do something and twist it up in a different way, whether that's doing live set, whether that's, you know, incorporating samples and live remixing and all that kind of stuff with the tech that's available now, or whether you're doing your own remixes and edits and stuff that only you have, right?
Yeah,
like
that's the dream, really, isn't it?
Yeah, because you want. Yeah, I think for me, that's something I've been working on, doing a lot of remixes and edits of stuff that I really like, but maybe isn't like perfect for me to play in the way that I play it, or just there's already a version out there, or there's something that I really want to do, but rather than just mixing an a cappella over the top of a track I'm already playing, just actually doing a mix of that thing. And then, like we said, there's even scope for doing other things with that later on. You can play it out for a year, and if there's loads of demand for it, you know, the label might come to you and say, what are you doing with that thing? Why don't we do something with it, you know?
Yeah.
So there's loads of scope for that. But yeah, so I'm using Machine, Logic, Moog, which I just sold.
Which one?
The Sub Fatty.
Yeah.
I've got a couple of Volcas, which are pretty cool. Got the Volca Beats, Volca Sample.
They're good fun, aren't they?
And what else? I mean, over the years, I've had various bits and pieces. Like I've had a Juno 6, Juno 106. Got a couple of Casio keyboards as well. They're quite cool for like mad little sounds and sound effects and stuff.
Dogs barking,
they're all
phones
great. Well, they're all great
helicopters.
They're all great for like sound design and samples and stuff as well. What else have I had over the years? Like Emu Sampler 6400. I've had a Akai S3000. I started with an Akai 950. I think the one that didn't even have a waveform display. It had
just
a
had numbers.
job dial.
Jesus, that thing. They had one of those at Northbrook when I was there, and it was just too painful.
You're basically just pressing the play button until you've cued it. The transients.
Yeah.
And what else? Old Behringer desk Euro desk thing. That's the 16 channel. It was always breaking. So I had to go back to GAC like so many times with it, and I had to send it off to Germany, and this was years ago. What else did we have? A few little like digital effect reverb units and stuff over the years. And I started out with I think the first ever synth that we bought as like a crew was Novation Supernova.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, that was awesome. I mean, it's still great. Now, Sticky used that a lot, actually, to do a lot of his garage tracks. The bass from that was...
Yeah, I bet.
And he's known as a bit of a bass master with a lot of his tracks, especially like Boo and stuff. It's pretty serious. But yeah, apparently all that stuff, and the bass from Triplets, which is like a big garage record as well, that was from the Supernova.
Really?
Yeah.
A lot of those Emu samplers were responsible for a lot of the bass we know and love in drum and bass. Like, from what I'm led to believe, again, never take anything I say as gospel, but all of Dillinger's bass like, and why they were so nasty comes from the filters in the EMU samplers, and putting 808s, 808 kick drums in there, and just, you know, destroying them with these, you know, with this EMU.
I heard that Dillinger's bass tone was made by running, it would have been, I guess, an 808 then kick or a sine wave through the sampler into a desk that basically the channel was maxed, and then he then took the signal from that and put it into the next channel and did the same thing.
Yeah, I can just so imagine that.
And
how many more channels we can't push it any harder. No, come on, we need some more channels.
And when you hear it, it sounds like that's what's happened. You know,
yeah,
it's just this monstrous, like growling, kind of driven.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's a story on the street anyway.
Right. Look, Scott, we've almost done 2 hours here.
Have we?
Yeah, imagine that.
Time flies when you're having fun, doesn't it?
Tell everyone where they can find all your stuff. What are your best socials?
So yeah, soundcloud.com/Scott Diaz. I'm on Twitter, Scott_Diaz. Same for Instagram. I've got a website, www.scottdiazmusic.com. You can check out the connected audio samples on Loopmasters.
Yep.
And I'm doing a whole bunch of gigs this year. I'm playing in Sheffield this weekend, playing in London in May, Doncaster in May. I'm doing Ibiza a couple of times for Defected, doing Croatia for Defected.
He's a busy boy.
Playing in Edinburgh, playing in Inverness.
Nice.
All that stuff's on the website as well, though.
Great.
But yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for... Thank you so much for coming in. And
thanks for having me.
Being my first. A pleasure.
Always
welcome.
Cheers, mate.
Take it easy, mate.